he is a CNN contributor. He's done 6 books, most recently Comeback, Conservatism That Can Win Again, 2007 Doubleday. He has regular columns for CNN.com, The Week, and Canada's National Post. He served as a special assistant to President Bush, 2001-2002. His first book, Dead Right, 1954, was described by Frank Rich of the New York Times as the smartest book written from the inside about the American conservative movement. David is from Canada, received his BA and MA simultaneously from Yale, and later graduated cum laude from Harvard Law School, where he was president of the Federalist Society. And he is a resident of Washington, so please help me welcome. Oh, let me mention before I introduce him, books by the 2 speakers, Among the Truthers by Jonathan Kay will be available in the back, and 9/11 Synthetic Terror by Webster Tarpley will also be available.
Yay.
And my understanding is both authors will remain to sign their books after the end. So, please help me welcome David Trump.
Peter, you omitted one fact from my biography, which is I'm an avid fan of the Spy Museum and a frequent leader of tours of out-of-town guests through these halls. This is a remarkable institution, and those of you who have not spent more time here really ought to make a point of it. It is a wonderful addition to the Washington scene. It is also, I think, a marvelous illustrator of some of the iron laws of Washington bureaucracy, because soon after the opening of this museum, which is devoted to spycraft and hence to the work of the Central Intelligence Agency, the Central Intelligence Agency's most important enemy, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, decided that they too needed a museum. And so there is now, thanks to you, a Law and Order Museum also in Washington, which is also a wonderful place to take friends and family. As you mentioned, I'm from Canada, which is how I know Jonathan Kay. He is my editor at the Washington Post, and he is the author of Among the Truthers. I have not had the pleasure of meeting Webster Tarpley before today. I, with you, am curious to hear what he has to say. Our topic tonight is conspiracy theories. In Jonathan, we have an analyst, and in Webster, we have a practitioner. So we will get to be able to see, where does this tendency in the human mind come from, and how do we cope with it? Man imposes meaning on the world. We see patterns. We look at some jam on our bread, and we see a human face. We look at the moon, and there is the man in the moon. This is an artifact of our mind, but our deep need to do this can produce results that are sometimes entertaining, sometimes kind of sinister, and that's what we'll be talking about today. Jonathan has led all of us on this amazing tour of the world of the truthers, the people who dispute the truth about what happened on 9/11, and we will have some disputation of that truth today. I think I have great confidence in the human species that while many of us are foolish, the species as a whole is wise, that human beings arrive at truth through disputation, and that in every era and every time there are wild allegations that are thrown out, they are strained away by history. And I have no doubt that will be the outcome of our process here today. And with that, let me begin with Jonathan Kay, who will speak for about 20 minutes, and then proceed to Webster Tarpley. Thank you.
Already slanted.
I know, already biased.
Thanks very much. I admire David's confidence that the truth would emerge. After looking at the comment thread of a lot of the newspaper articles on my website, I kind of have less faith in the human capacity for reason. But I imagine that we have saner minds in the audience tonight. David is quite right when he said that humans are pattern-seeking creatures. It's pretty much the theme of my book. Humans can handle good, they can handle evil. What humans are not good at is handling chaos. And most early efforts for humans for creating religions, philosophies, was about imposing a sort of moral order on the universe. Essentially explaining the age-old question of why bad things happen to good people. And that is why monotheistic religions are so popular. Because whatever happens in the world, no matter how random or miserable or agonizing it seems to be, there is some explanation that it fits into some cosmic pattern, even if it's a pattern that we can't recognize. Now, conspiracy theories are unlike religions in the sense that conspiracy theories do not supply gods. But conspiracy theories do supply something that arguably is just as valuable. They supply demons. And when you're looking to answer the question of why do bad things happen to good people, whether it's terrorism or a financial crisis or war, demons are very useful things to have around. And if you have a conspiracy theory that finds your demon, gives it a name, then you have a very simple answer to the question of why terrorism happens, or why wars happen, or why people's businesses go bankrupt. It's because of the Freemasons, or it's because of the Illuminati, or it's because of the Zionists, or it's because of the Muslims, or it's because of the Bilderbergers, or it's because of the New World Order. As I argue in my book, the actual identity of the villain is somewhat beside the point. What matters in terms of the psychology of conspiracy theories is that all evil has a single unitary address. And although the world of a conspiracy theorist's mind can be a very dark place, it's full of evil plots and planes flying into buildings and smoke-filled rooms, in a sense, there's good news that comes out of it, which is that if evil has a name, and if evil has an address, then we can fight evil. We can uncover it. Whether it's George Bush or whether it's United Nations, it doesn't matter. We know what evil is, we know where evil lives, and we can dedicate our lives to telling other people the truth, which is what a lot of people do on the internet. And this struggle becomes liberating for a lot of people, and it becomes somewhat utopian, because the idea is once this evil is uncovered, once the truth is known, then the world will be a better place. Now, let me get back to the book and the people I interviewed for it, including Mr. Tarpley, who was kind enough to give me his time. When I started writing my book, I interviewed a wide variety of conspiracy theorists all around the United States. And when I started off, my first question was, what do you believe? Tell me your theory of 9/11. Or tell me your theory of how Barack Obama became president, or how the pharmaceutical companies are conspiring against us, or how the financial crisis was created, stuff like that. This turned into something of a dead end. Because when you talk to a conspiracy theorist, you ask them that open-ended question, you can end up sitting there for about 8 hours. Modern conspiracy theories tend to be extraordinarily technical. It's why I pity Mr. Tarpley. He only has 20 minutes. I'm sure he could speak for hours and hours and hours. For me, it's somewhat simpler. I'm going to tell you all I know in 20.
Pablum, just believe it.
So that was sort of a dead end. When I talked to 9/11 conspiracy theorists, I asked them, I said, tell me what happened on 9/11. And I would get a very technical narrative about what happened with NORAD, how the Twin Towers fell, the metallurgical properties of the beams in Twin Tower 1 and 2. And after a while, I started asking a different question, which I found was much more interesting. It became the basis for my book. And the question was, when did you start believing all this? When did you start believing that 9/11 was an inside job? Or when did you start believing that Barack Obama's presidency was illegitimate? And then the answers became much more interesting, because then I was getting to the root of the issue, which was, when did you lose your faith in the narrative that's being told to you by your government and by the media? When did you start to believe that the reality around us that we're being told by our media is a lie? And people told me some very interesting things. In the case of 9/11, for instance, what I found is that most people who joined the 9/11 Truth Movement, they didn't join it in 2001. They joined it in 2003, and in particular the spring and summer of 2003. Because when they heard there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, they asked themselves the question, the government lied to me about that, what else is the government lying to me about? And once people ask that question, and that question becomes the guiding question of their life, they can go to some pretty dark places and go into some pretty dark rabbit holes. Now, I think it's an important question to ask. It's the very basis of my profession. I'm a journalist. And unless you do ask that question, when is the government lying to you and when is it telling the truth, there's no such thing as investigative journalism. All you have is press releases from the government. But once the idea that the government is always lying to you and the media is always lying to you becomes a sort of religious faith, then you've become a full-time conspiracy theorist. And the answers I got for when people believe this stuff is very interesting. As I say, for 9/11, it tended to be in 2003. It tended to be the lack of weapons of mass destruction. When I talked to Barack Obama conspiracy theorists, the so-called birthers, for them it tends to be right at the moment that Barack Obama became president. I mean, these are people, they were all conservatives, and the idea of America electing a liberal Democrat to the White House just caused their political faith in America to just shatter. And they became convinced that his presidency must be illegitimate in some cosmic sense. Many of them devoted their life to proving that he's in fact an illegitimate president.